chair who's chairing the event, and she'll speak briefly, and then she will hand to you and introduce you to make your remarks. So you'll be at about, I guess, 6 or 7 minutes past the hour, probably.
That's fantastic. And you do know that I have to go fairly soon afterwards. Is that still okay? You're okay with that?
Of course.
Good.
Of course. It's great to have you with us.
Lovely.
Thanks, Helen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so we're opening now to participants. Thank you to everyone who has joined us so far. We will start this event in about 90 seconds time. For those of you just joining, welcome. This event will start in just under 1 minute. A very warm welcome to participants joining us from around the world today for this event, and to our speakers, who I think come from at least 4 continents. I'm Howard Taylor. I'm the Executive Director of the Global Partnership to End Violence Against Children. During the next hour, we will hear for the first time publicly headlines from the World Bank's investment case for safe schools and from the new Safe to Learn strategy, both of which are being launched at this event today. And we will hear perspectives from an extraordinary group of expert speakers, including youth advocates. To give everyone the best experience of this event, just a few practical things before we get going. First of all, the event will be in English, but there is simultaneous translation available in French and Spanish. Please use the button at the bottom of the Zoom screen to select your preferred language. And only the speakers' cameras and microphones will be enabled during the event, but everyone is welcome. In fact, everyone is encouraged to comment and ask any questions in the chat box. And there may be time for 1 or 2 of those questions from the chat to be put to the panel, but all of the questions will be noted and followed up as appropriate after the event. And finally, the full investment case and the Safe to Learn strategy will be uploaded onto the End Violence website and will be shared by email with all participants after today's event. It's now my great pleasure to introduce our chair for today's event, former Health Minister of Botswana, Executive Secretary of the African Leaders Malaria Alliance, and today acting as board chair of the End Violence Partnership, Joy Pimafi. Joy, over to you.
Thank you so much, Howard. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, girls and boys, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to joining forces to end violence in and through schools. The launch of the Safe to Learn strategy and the World Bank investment case. It is a great pleasure to welcome you to this important Global Education Summit side event. I am delighted to see so many global leaders and activists here in today's virtual audience, united around such a critical issue for children and humanity in what has been, as you will all agree, a year like no other. Millions of children have been affected by school closures and education disruption brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. This unprecedented crisis has abruptly shown us the critical role that schools play in many spheres of a child's life, from education to protection and mental health, and for families and communities more broadly. School closures have deprived countless children, particularly the most vulnerable among them, and in the most vulnerable situations and contexts, of an education as well as an important space for socializing and for safety and for protection and stability for the child. Girls and boys everywhere have been learning at home and online. They've been exposed to violence and abuse, and at the same time, deprived of the protection and support that schools can offer. At the same time, some children were relieved to escape the violence that they experience on a daily basis at school from their peers or even from adults, or on their journey to school and from school. Regardless of the setting where violence takes place or its type, from corporal punishment to attacks, bullying, sexual abuse, violence is a grave violation of a child's rights with devastating consequences on children and on our world. Violence undermines children's health. It undermines their learning and their development, and often follows girls and boys into adulthood with implications for individuals, for families, communities, and for our economies. Today's event is a special one. It is a unique global opportunity to reflect together in a year as no other on how to ensure that all schools, no matter how education is provided, are safe to learn for all our children. Reopening schools is important, but simply going to school is not enough. With the vision to end violence in and through schools and other learning environments, the Safe to Learn initiative unites key actors in the education, child protection, violence prevention, and health fields to unlock the multiple wins of ending violence. Today, we will hear from these key actors and from young people themselves what needs to happen to end violence in and through schools, why it is the right investment to make, and why the time for it is now. Investing in safe and inclusive education is not only our duty, but a cost-effective way to address the impacts of COVID and to deliver multiple sustainable goals. I thank you. It now gives me great pleasure to welcome Ms. Helen Grant, United Kingdom Prime Minister's Special Envoy for Girls' Education. Ms. Grant, you have the floor, my lady, to share with us your opening remarks.
Thank you very much indeed for that introduction, Joy, and thank you to all parties concerned for inviting me to be with you today at this important discussion on violence in schools. As many of you will know, 2021 is a major year for the UK. We're presidents of the G7 and COP26 and co-hosting the Global Education Summit, which officially starts next Wednesday. All of these events are watershed moments with big opportunities to shine a spotlight on the importance of girls' education, how transformative it can be, and the barriers that still exist. At the Global Education Summit next week, we're hoping and working very hard with our partners to raise $5 billion for education for the next 5 years. This will provide 75 million children with opportunities to learn in over 90 different countries, which are probably home to around 80% of the world's out-of-school children. Last month, the UK made our pledge of £430 million. This is the largest pledge the UK has ever made to the GPE, an increase of 15% on our previous pledges. And this is testament to the UK's commitment to this crucial issue. I'm hugely honoured to be the Prime Minister's Special Envoy for girls' education. My role very much is to globally champion his message that providing 12 years of quality education for every girl on the planet is one of the best ways of tackling many of the major issues facing the world today, such as poverty, climate change, and inequality. Investing in a girls' education is an absolute game changer. The child of a mother who can read is 50% more likely to live beyond the age of 5, twice as likely to attend school themselves, and 50% more likely to be immunised. Girls who are educated are more able to choose if, when, and how many children they have. Girls' education is therefore vital for women and girls in terms of their own self-empowerment, but it's also important in levelling up society, boosting incomes, and developing economies and nations. Sadly, before, during, and after the pandemic, violence has been a key barrier to girls attending and achieving in school. Violence has a significant and lasting impact on a child's well-being, their ability to learn, and their future prospects. And we must work hard, and we must work together to ensure schools of every shape and size are safe spaces. The UK is a proud founding partner of the Safe to Learn Global Initiative, which aims to keep children safe in school around the world. It operates in countries such as Lebanon, Nepal, South Sudan, and Uganda. These programs use evidence-based solutions to prevent and respond to violence against children through the training of students, teachers, and the wider community. We're also using evidence from our What Works to Prevent Violence programme to help children, teachers, and parents in schools in Pakistan and Afghanistan. And we're seeing some great results with reductions of violence of around 50%, including peer violence, corporal punishment, and depression. The UK is absolutely committed to addressing all of the complex barriers to girls' education, including violence in schools. No girl should have her hopes and dreams dashed because she faces violence in school or from anywhere else. And I call on partners and governments around the world to work together to address this. I know the weight of the challenge with girls' education is very significant, but our ability to make change in the world, if we work together, should never, ever be underestimated. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, my lady. This is precisely why we are here. And we thank you so much for sharing this wisdom with us. I would now like to turn to the World Bank and to the Safe to Learn initiative to present to us the two instruments for our action that are being presented and launched here today: the World Bank investment case and the Safe to Learn strategy. Dr. Quinton Warden, main author of the investment case from the World Bank. Over to you.
Many thanks, Joy. And let me try to share my screen with the PowerPoint presentation. I hope that you can all see it. I've been given, I think, about 7 minutes to give you a flavor for the work that we have done to make an investment case to end violence in schools. And I should say that we benefited for this work from funding from the Global Partnership to End Violence Against Children. So my presentation will consider three components of the investment case. The first is to share some of the results regarding the cost of inaction. What's the impact today of violence in school on children? I will then briefly talk about interventions. We have indeed a range of interventions that have been proven successful to reduce violence in school. And this is why we can make a strong investment case that we should do this. And then I will end up very briefly with a mention of the role of different stakeholders before giving the floor to Chloe for the Safe to Learn strategy. Now, I think we all know that violence in school is very widespread. If you talk about bullying, for example, in most countries, it's about on average a quarter of children that are victims of bullying. If you talk about physical violence, it's often up to a third. Sexual violence is lower, but often underreported. What we found by analyzing hundreds of surveys is that violence in school had large negative impacts on schooling and learning. I mean, children who are victims of violence in schools tend to have a poor experience in school. They have lower attendance. Violence is actually one of the reasons mentioned for dropping out of school. The children also lack trust in the schools and in their teachers, which can also affect learning. So all of those effects matter. And what we found using data from PISA and PASEC assessments, for example, is that the impact of being the victim of violence in school on learning is pretty large, and as large as many of the other factors that we often consider essential for learning. Violence in school also has an impact on educational attainment, and as I mentioned it, quite a few children are actually dropping out of school because of violence. Now, we try to put an economic cost of value to violence in school, and I won't go in details in how we did this, but I will briefly explain the reasoning. So we start from the fact that human capital, which is the value of the future earnings of the labor force, is actually the main source of wealth for countries, much more than natural or produced capital, for example. Now, education accounts for a large share of human capital wealth. Violence in schools then reduces educational attainment as well as learning. And the estimate that we provided is that we would today have about 11 trillion US dollars in higher human capital wealth if we didn't have violence in school. Now, that number is just a ballpark number. There are many assumptions. The main point is that the economic cost of doing nothing is extremely large. Now, the cost that we provide in the study looks really at the impact of violence on schooling and on learning. But there are many other impacts, and the surveys that we use suggest that children may suffer from injuries when in fights. Violence is associated with a range of risky behaviors, consuming alcohol, using drugs, among others. It is associated with a lack of trust in others. It leads to a number of health problems, lower psychological well-being. It even is associated with higher tolerance towards violence later in life, not feeling waste. I mean, these are just a few examples on which we don't provide a monetary cost, but it's really astonishing how widespread the negative effects of violence in school are on the children that are victims of violence. Now, a big part of the study actually looks at the interventions that can help us prevent violence in school. What we use is a simple life cycle framework to emphasize that we do need to start right when children are born, and actually for some interventions before they are born, because what happens in early childhood or before birth is very, very important. And we emphasize, for example, programs such as those providing parental skills or preventing the risk of child maltreatment. We focus a bit more, though, on what we can do in primary and secondary education. Many of the programs actually can work in both settings, but in primary schools, we emphasize the need to provide interventions that help for socio-emotional learning and peaceful conflict resolution. At the secondary level, we emphasize a bit more anti-bullying programs and initiatives that try to reduce the markers of gender inequality. Now, we do have a range of rigorous impact evaluations for those programs. It is true that quite a few of those impact evaluations have been done in high-income countries, and we have a few less in low and middle-income countries, but we have enough evidence to suggest that we can reduce through those programs violence in schools, and importantly, that there is a high benefit to cost ratio. For many programs, for example, anti-bullying, the evaluations and the cost benefit analysis suggest that the investments is really worth it. What you save in terms of avoiding a range of issues later is much more than what you need to invest to implement those programs. Now, this is my last slide, and it introduces in a way what Chloe will talk about, which is the need to engage all stakeholders. Some of you may be familiar with what is called in the literature the Ecological Framework, and it was proposed a while back by the WHO. The basic idea is that we have risk factors leading some children to be victims of violence in school and out of school, as well as some children to actually commit violence. And those risk factors are at the individual level, but more so at the family level, within the school, and then within the community and at the level of society as well. And what we recommend in the investment case, apart from specific interventions, is to really adopt whole school approaches. There is a beautiful example in Uganda of the Good School Toolkit that has proven through rigorous evaluations to really reduce substantially violence in schools, but also to consider what can be done in terms of broader policies. So I don't know if I have taken more or less than my 7 minutes, but I will stop here. And thank you again, Joy, for this wonderful opportunity to share our work. And I will stop sharing my screen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Quentin. That was excellent. Exactly 7 minutes, right on time. And now we'll turn to Dr. Chloe Favre, who will share with us this exciting Safe to Learn strategy that we can all use. Dr. Favre, over to you.
Thank you very much, Joy. So Quentin made a perfect transition into the Safe to Learn strategy, because if we have, fantastic contributions through the World Bank investment case to end violence in school, we also know that, knowing the costs, knowing the negative impacts on violence, and knowing the evidence, even though it's critical to guide policymaking and to invest wisely and effectively, it is not enough to produce change. For change to happen, we need people, we need institutions, we need an ecosystem that really stand behind one vision and one approach. And this is what the Safe to Learn new strategy is about. So the Safe to Learn strategy is really based on the coalition of powerful partners that really came together back in 2018 following a youth manifesto that really called on the international community to step up action to prevent violence in and through schools. These 14 partners are joining forces from different perspectives and different sectors. We have in the coalition financiers of education, we have experts and advisors, practitioners, implementers, and advocates from the private and the public spheres. They come from different backgrounds and sectors too, education, of course, but also violence prevention, child protection, and health. And all of that provides the richness of Safe to Learn. Even though they come from different perspectives, they are all united by the same vision and the same understanding that no child can learn if they experience violence in school, on the way to school, or online. And it's really not, an intellectual understanding, but it's a very grounded understanding. Each of the partners of the Safe to Learn coalition really understand it because they have witnessed violence in and through schools, in and around schools. They have observed it or they have experienced it. And they know that safety and learning cannot be thought through separately. So of course, Joy, reminded us over the past year and a half, the global pandemic has really disturbed everything in our lives, and in particular in the lives of children. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just, here we go. In the lives of children, and what the global pandemic has really showed us is really that it has heightened the learning crisis. That was a pre-existing crisis. We all were working to actually bridge the gap in terms of the learning crisis. It has been heightened, of course, in terms of the schools closures and all the disruptions in terms of education systems. But it has also unveiled another crisis that was also pre-existing in terms of children's rights, showing that how violence against children is indeed extremely widespread. So what the Safe to Learn strategy is about is really building on the strengths of this coalition of partners around one goal, which is to build foundation for at-scale change. So we really want to show that we can transform systems from within. We can follow the life cycle approach that Quentin was talking about, from early childhood development up to secondary and technical training, to really make sure that wherever children and young people learn, they are safe to learn. And so for that, the Safe to Learn strategy proposes a new methodology. It actually is very ambitious because it tries to move away from a collection of individual efforts to really a methodology for collective actions, building on the strengths and the comparative advantages of each of the partners, part of the coalition, to really accelerate change and disrupt business as usual. The strategy is based on two main pillars that are very much complementary and reinforcing each other. One is really focusing at the country level, because we know that change happens at the country level. Children live in a specific country, they live in a specific community, they go to school in a specific community. And so if we really want to create change at scale, we absolutely need to brand out efforts at the country level. But we also know that contexts are very diverse and very different, of course. And so we adopt a differentiated approach for that. And we work through our partners because we want to multiply. It's not a question of reinventing the wheel. It's a question of multiplying our efforts and being stronger together when we work together. And so for that, we need to do it wisely, to use the evidence that Quentin presented that is captured in the investment case of the World Bank, but also to do it in an ethical manner, because we're talking about children and we're talking about their rights. And so the Safe to Learn life quality really helps doing that in a sound and ethical manner. The second pillar is about global advocacy, and it's very much reinforcing the first pillar in terms of country focus, because we need, if we want to be stronger together, we need to speak with one voice. And this one voice is important in terms of conveying the same narrative in terms of what evidence exists, what can be done, how to do it, how to really mainstream and embed within education system to be effective. It's above important if we want to strengthen the authorizing environment to make sure that the next best practices in education would be safe learning environments for all. So let me end by just saying that I hope this event is not just another event, but it will be considered as a turning point. I think today what you will hear from our distinguished panelists is that we have everything to make it work. The only thing that we need now is to believe that we can do it. Everybody needs to believe that we can do it. You need to believe that we can do it, and you need to ask for it. Us And Safe to Learn, and I'm honored and humbled to represent the coalition of partners of Safe to Learn. We want to take our responsibility, and we want to take the pledge through the strategy to really do our part and make sure that we accelerate progress to ensure safe learning environments for all girls and boys. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chloe. That was excellent. So we are all going to support our children to give voice to their needs. And we have a panel here of very, very active stakeholders in the field, including young people themselves. And I'm going to introduce its panelists as I ask them the question. And the main issue that these panelists are going to be addressing is how all of us, stakeholders, members of the global community, can join forces to end violence in and through schools. Now, I will start with Mr. Gavin Dykes. He's the program director at the Education World Forum. Now, Mr. Dykes, the Education World Forum has called for building forward education systems to be stronger and bolder. What do you mean? And how does it relate to safety in and around schools? You have got 2 minutes.
Thank you, Joy. I shall be as quick as I can. And thank you for all the initial information and the great context provided by Quentin and Chloe, and indeed everyone who's already spoken. Building forward stronger, bolder, and better is the theme of our next Education World Forum. The way that we handle the theme is not to be telling people what they should be thinking, but to ask them how they might describe this in their own context. So we will ask contributors at the World Forum to share their ideas, their strategies, and their experiences so that they can learn from each other and through discussion find ways to improve learning and education generally. There is no single answer to how this might work, for each of us is in a different circumstance. We all start from a different place. We each have our own views. We each have our own sense of priorities for the country, the world, the region, the location, community, or the self that we represent. So that we have to have those, we have to hear those different views in order to come at this from the point of view of a collective understanding, collective intelligence, and a human capital way of thinking about things. But through those discussions, I firmly believe we get to a better place. My own personal view is that student learning is diminished always if students are frightened, if they're stressed, if they're bullied, if they're hungry, if they're thirsty, if they have a lack of trust in those around them, if they are uncertain in their place in the world, and if they are unsure of the value and relevance of their studies. And I would just say, I think what you should say is we also have old people speaking today. The students actually are the main ones who are coming up later. If we want to engage the extraordinary capacity of students to come up with ideas, with innovations, and to act to help improve our world, then we have to build their agency. We have to build their well-being and pay attention to that as teachers and learners. Surely the pandemic is something that has taught that has really re-emphasized that to us. It's an absolutely vital part of education functioning well. And by bringing communities together and finding ways for them to address local needs, I think is a critical component of improving education. I think that's the way we will develop active, wonderful citizens for our countries, people who have the great capability of changing the way things are and improving them, making better. So the praise stronger, bolder, and better has at its heart care for safety of students, care for safety of their teachers, and the value of working together, listening together, and acting together.
Thank you so much, Gavin. Very, very, much on point and forward-looking, and also very, very, comprehensive in getting everybody together. Now, Jem Saavedra, who is the Global Director for Education at the World Bank. I would like to ask you, as Minister of Education in Peru and now leading the World Bank's work on education, you clearly recognize the critical importance of safe learning environments. You have also supported the bank's work on the investment case to provide the world with the data it needs to inform accelerated progress. From your experience and your point of view, what commitments do we need to see from the global funders of education?
Thank you very much, Joy, for this opportunity. And let me also thank the Global Partnership to End Violence Against Children for the support, for the partnership. And it's great to be part of this Safe to Learn initiative with 13 other partners. At some point, I mean, before just one point very quickly before going to the issue of the commitments that you were mentioning, Joy, is that one could think if we really need to have an investment case, right, to end violence in schools. I mean, kids have the right to an education, and kids have the right to be safe and be happy. But I think despite that, I think it's important to do it. It's important to have this investment case to make evident the cost of inaction, right? And having this evidence, it's critical to make sure that all countries have the political will, right, to undertake the complex investments and commitments that are needed to tackle this issue. Because this is not easy public policy, right? These are interventions that will have to happen at the school, at the community, and at the national level, right? At the same time, simultaneously. And it's about changing mindsets. And when it's public policy that is about changing mindsets, it's not easy. It's very complex. Public policy, and it's great to have a document that says, well, this is the cost if you don't do it, and second, this is the cost benefit analysis of different type of intervention. So it's useful to have that. In the education team of the World Bank, we have what we call there's a 5-pillar education approach, right? What is that successful countries have to do in order to have effective learning? And we say, well, you need to have prepared learners, right? Invest in what's happening at home and good early child education. Second pillar, we need to build teachers' career. Third pillar, the right pedagogical approaches. But fourth pillar is safe and inclusive schools, right? And we have a fifth pillar that is about management. But we have recognized safe schools as a critical pillar for effective learning, right? And recognizing this Venn diagram that Chloe was showing, right? That actually for learning to happen, kids have to be safe, be able to, and at school, and there has to be a space in which they can really thrive. If not, all the other investments that we're doing on education will render irrelevant, right? If the kid is not safe at school. And let me close with the commitments that you were mentioning. At the World Bank and for global funders of education more generally, let me mention 4 commitments quickly. One is, the first commitment is to make the problem visible and central in the education discussion, right? Visibility, advocacy, recognition of the problem is essential for political commitment, right? And that's not trivial, right? And that is work that we really need to do. Second commitment is to be evidence-based, right? Let's see what works in pilot cases, but most important, what works at scale, right? Because this is not about a nice boutique pilot project that could have high unit costs. No, we need to do this in all schools in the country, right? So scale is absolutely critical. Third, a commitment to the core principles in our own operations, right? And we are working now and finalizing guidelines to address sexual exploitation and abuse and sexual harassment in all human development projects. And fourth is a commitment to support ministers of education to scale up their efforts. Right, that's what we need to continue working in our operations. I mean, the bank has increased its lending the last 2 years, have been more than 5 billion per year, and we want to make sure that in most of those operations we tackle the issue of safety at school with our institutions. So concluding, this is we're talking about the rights of children. They have the right to be and to feel safe, but they also have the right to education, right? And that right to education will not be fulfilled if they are not safe at school. There's a huge homework for all of us, but I think working together, we can make a difference for our children. Thank you very much, Joy.
Thank you so much, Jamie. That's really an excellent example of, you know, what are we talking about when we talk about commitments and when we talk about funding, and what is the funding supposed to do? Now, Ms. Carol Mumbi, you are a youth advocate in Kenya. Now, how does the presentation and discussion so far relate to your own experience growing up in Kenya, being an activist in your community? What do you wish the government and the global leaders to know, and what do you hope to see change in the future?
Hello, and thank you for the invitation. My name is Caroline Mumbi. I'm 21 years old. I'm from Mombasa, Kenya, and I'm a volunteer at Kenya Alliance of the Advancement of Children's Rights. I use advocate back at home, and I am really happy to be here today in this big event. And for me, it's a really big event because my friends, my siblings, and I are waiting for big action. I have seen far too many of my friends and classmates being beaten up and being bullied at school and at home for some reasons that some are not even reasonable. Some you can say because they're physically challenged, others because they're not able to get or to understand schoolwork. And I myself also have experienced bullying, and it affected my performance, it affected my drive to go to school, it affected my confidence. And I think it was one of the reasons that drove me to become a youth advocate, because I want change. I want change after seeing so much violence happening to younger kids and even experiencing it myself. I wanted to educate my community on the real danger of experiencing violence at a tender age, because we are leaders of today and we're not leaders of tomorrow. So there should be justice. And I want the leaders to know that early pregnancies, dropping out of schools, there are always reasons behind it, but you won't know them unless you go and speak to their community. And it won't be fixed by just talking in the boardrooms, having events like these, or in the parliamentary sittings. It needs to be taken down to the schools and to the communities, because that is where we will see actions. No more saying that something will change and then nothing happens, giving us a platform for a year, then it's quickly forgotten. If we want real change, and the real change comes in us having laws put in place that protect me and the future generations, that are meaningful, that even the current laws that we have, can they be re-examined if we want change? And as a young advocate, I really wish for progress. I wish for schools that are good and safe, where students are encouraged and supported to gain personal skills like respect and boundaries. And also, I feel more hopeful today because there are many great leaders here that I've had them speak and say something. And the sirs and madams around, I want to work with you. We want to work with you. And I hope one day soon we will make and create a real and concrete thing or change in our schools, and we make them a better place for students to look forward to going and to learning. Because as the pandemic has happened, so much violence has happened at home than how it happens back at school. But if students are at school and school is safe, why not enable them to go there? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Very powerful message. You want action, speaking is not enough. We have to walk the talk. And we want everybody who is here today, who is going to attend the summit next week, to be clear that the Safe to Learn strategy must be implemented. Now, Joe Bond, you are the Chief Technical Officer for the Global Partnership for Education. How is the prevention of violence in schools included in the Global Partnership for Education strategy, so that you can transform the education system over the next 5 years?
Thank you, and thank you for the question, Madam Chair, and thank you, of course, to the Global Partnership to End Violence for convening this discussion. The excellent investment case from the World Bank, the leadership from the UK alongside Kenya in co-hosting the Global Education Summit, and really putting a spotlight on this important issue. And Caroline, your words were incredibly powerful. We do need to turn words into action. Just a bit of background. In 2019, GPE reviewed the sector plans of 35 countries, and we found about half had safety or violence strategies. We're also seeing an increase in programming to address violence in and around school, including through our COVID grants and because of the actions of many partners such as the World Bank and UNICEF on this call today. It's a start, but it's not enough. So looking forward, you asked about how prevention of violence is included in our new strategy. So firstly, clearly we're working with our partners to make sure schools are safe, healthy, inclusive environments free from discrimination. Secondly, by hardwiring gender equality into every aspect of our country engagement and support, addressing gender in and through education, recognizing that girls and boys face different barriers to quality education and learning, and that violence itself is gendered. Boys may be more likely to be subject to corporal punishment and discipline. Girls carry this heavy burden of sexual violence, practices that are often deeply rooted in harmful norms, in harmful social norms in the wider society. And we need to understand those and unpick those if education policies and programs are to be effective for girls and boys. Thirdly, our new strategy is underpinned by a new methodology and operating model, which includes working with our partners to really lift the lid on what is standing in the way of accelerating implementation and delivery progress in key areas, getting right down to what is happening. So, for example, if a country is seeking to dramatically improve foundational learning outcomes for children in rural areas, partners will work under government leadership to systematically and deeply ask, why is progress slow? What is standing in the way of delivery? And we know if we look deeply enough that the answer to those questions will speak to the experience the child has in and around school, and whether that experience is, quite frankly, one that nurtures potential or traumatizes, whether that environment is a place of safety or of fear. And we know then that we can bring in initiatives, and Jaime has spoken to some of those, such as working with schools and communities on positive discipline that would need to be factored in as part of a whole school approach. Fourthly, we've launched the Girls Education Accelerator, a new funding window that supports countries that really want to make progress on closing the education gap between girls and boys, with high rates of early child marriage a key indicator for eligibility, making sure that we are really factoring that in to countries that are going to be eligible for those grants. And similar to what Jaime has said, our board has agreed a policy on the prevention of sexual harassment, exploitation and abuse, stating the expectations that we have of all of the grant agents that we will work with, that they are alert to and tackling these issues. But I think my final point is it's going to take a mindset shift to bring this issue firmly into the national education dialogue. It's going to take the determination and alignment of the many efforts of all partners across this partnership, across GPE, to move the dial on the issue. And it's going to take actors within the education system and beyond, from schools, communities, political leadership, the justice system, to be engaged and to align their efforts. So I would end by sort of calling on everyone who cares about this issue to bring your expertise to local education groups, to advocate for and align behind national efforts to make learning environments safe and free from violence. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Jo. We absolutely agree with you, and we look to you as being an important partner in implementing or supporting the implementation of the strategy that we are launching today. Now, Dr. Bernadette Madrid, you are the co-founder of the Coalition for Good Schools and the Executive Director of Child Protection Network Foundation in the Philippines. Can you tell us about how Safe to Learn and the Coalition for Good Schools complement and reinforce each other by raising the importance of voices from where you are, and why does it matter? You have 2 minutes. Thank you. Dr. Madrid, you are muted.
Yes.
Can you please unmute?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you again. And greetings to everyone who is part of this auspicious launch. And we're very happy that Safe Schools, Safe to Learn is now officially launched. We have been very excited because the coalition for good schools in the Global South is really a coalition of practitioners in the Global South working to prevent violence in schools and through schools. So we are right there in the Global South working right now through many years, trying very hard to achieve what Safe to Learn would like to achieve globally. And COGS, as we call it for short, the coalition, would like the experience of these Global South practitioners working right there along with the children in the Global South to be heard, both in the policy and plans and structure that now we have a whole coalition working on around the globe. So we're actually already ready also to share the experience of the different hubs working in Asia, Latin America, and the Philippines is in the Asian hub, and in Africa, so that all of these different voices will be heard as all the plans are now being made, and all of these experiences that's been going on for years will be shared with everyone. So I think that COGS and Safe to Learn really complement each other and share the same vision. So we're happy to be here in this launch and to work together to achieve the goals of Safe to Learn. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Madrid. Excellent. I mean, South to South learning, sharing, this is exactly what success requires. Now, Mr. Chad Rodri, you are the youth advocate and you are also a student in Jamaica. Now, Jamaica is both a pioneer country in preventing violence and facing significant challenges in terms of violence as well. Can you tell us why such an event as this gives you hope, and hopefully it does, and how children and youth can hold all of us partners accountable?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good day all, or in Jamaica, as they say, to all God, everybody. Today I greet you from the beautiful city of Kingston. I am Chad, and it is a pleasure to be here to represent all our Jamaican children and young people to speak on preventing violence at school, on the way to school, and anywhere children learn. As we all know, Jamaica is known for our beautiful sunshine beaches, world-class music, and diverse culture across the world. Yet, we still have major challenges as it relates to crime and violence. When I was younger, I too faced this personal issue. I was robbed on the way to school. I was bullied in school, and I saw so many of my friends and loved ones around me being abused or bullied, many of which have had to receive psychosocial support and medical care. This is a reality that unfortunately so many students, and I dare say too many students in Jamaica face every day. I see my younger relatives and friends and worry at the thought that they too face these similar risks. But I am not daunted. I am inspired by the words of our Governor General, who once said that there is nothing wrong with Jamaica that cannot be fixed by what is right with it. At the age of 16, I knew I had to make a difference. I began advocating for student safety in schools and on the streets. I became a student leader to represent this movement, to try and inspire others to do better. Then I decided to study law, which I'm in my final year, because I wanted to protect children's rights and advocate for those who have no voice. With other student leaders, I have been involved with the government to implement new school safety laws, which have been effective. I am committed, passionate, and relentless towards creating a safer, more peaceful, and prosperous Jamaica. We, the youth, the transformative force that all our respective countries are depending on, must hold our stakeholders accountable. We want to see you, our leaders, take bold and decisive actions to tackle this intergenerational issue that has for far too long affected too many Jamaicans and students worldwide for far too long. I want to live in a country where every child, whether you're from Trenchtown, Cherry Gardens, or Mona, can go to school and learn without fear. I believe in Jamaica. I believe that we can all work together to break the cycle of violence so that Jamaica and all the other countries can be the place of choice to live, work, raise families, do business, and retire in paradise. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. A powerful ending to the panel discussion. This is why we are here. We are here precisely to ensure that every child is able to grow and to learn and to attain their own self-actualization and to thrive without being interrupted by violence. We are absolutely privileged to have with us today Her Excellency, the Honorable Janet Museveni. She is the First Lady of the Republic of Uganda and the Minister of Education and Sport. So she works with children every day and is looking after the extent to which they can thrive. Honorable Janet Museveni, Your Excellency, it is a privilege and an honor for me to give you the floor.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I have only been given 4 minutes, and obviously I can't share so much. I'm going to be as brief as I can. Dear young people, ladies and gentlemen, I want to begin by thanking God for using the organizers to put together this global event that is to act as a wake-up call for the human family, to remind each one of us that if we want to see a peaceful world, we must begin by teaching our children to grow up in peace and indeed to provide schools that are a safe haven for our children across the globe. It is a shame, I must confess, that we all know that violence is taking place and affects students every day in all the countries of the world, rich and poor. We also know that violence is not educative because it is not constructive. Instead, it is damaging, it is destructive, and brings negative emotions as the children grow. However, I am happy to report to you that Uganda is one of those countries that endorsed the Safe to Learn Call to Action initiative, and I can confirm to this conference that we are working tooth and nail against this evil in our country. Teachers have been retooled. A child helpline has been established among school communities, and teacher education and development is ongoing to ensure that we will not stop until our children are safe at school, enough for them to be the ones to testify. Indeed, we know that education is key to development, but quality and inclusive education is achieved only when learners, all learners, are safe at school. This event has been a unique global opportunity to reflect together on how to ensure this. I appeal to all of us to work together to eliminate violence against children and unlock the multiple wins of ending violence in and through schools. We do owe it to our children, and we cannot wait any longer. And as I conclude, if you just give me 1 minute more, I want to end by saying one word to GPE. Thank you, GPE. for walking the talk. Thank you and God bless you.
Your Excellency, we are fully inspired and we congratulate Uganda on the progress that it is making and on becoming an example to other countries of what we can do to walk the talk, so that it is not just the GPE that's walking the talk, but Uganda is walking the talk. We want every country to walk the talk, and we thank you for your best practice. It's been an honor, Madam. So, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants, this is our launch and our message for today. We have a new strategy. We have the evidence that backs it up. We want everybody to walk the talk, like the First Lady of Uganda, the Honorable Minister of Education, has just directed. I would like to hand over to Howard. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joy. Thank you, Your Excellency, the First Lady of Uganda. Thank you to all of our speakers, all participants, for what's been a very powerful, a very inspirational and informative conversation today. I was scribbling notes as we went along, and my takeaway is that mainly the ending violence in and through schools is right, it is smart, and it's possible. We heard speakers talk about the right of children to safety and the right to learn. It's smart. Quentin has laid out the investment case work with the World Bank. It's a smart investment and it's possible. There are proven interventions and we have Safe to Learn as a vehicle to catalyze and support action at scale. We also have a coalition, and I think we now need to build a movement that's going to do the inspiration to get to that mindset shift that Joe spoke about for the impact at scale that Jaime referenced. We also have heard really powerful voices, because movements need powerful voices, and such as Caroline and Chad, speaking of their experience, but also the leaders, the committed leaders that we've heard speak today. And so as per Chloe's comment, let's make today a turning point. As Joy said, let's walk the talk. Let's take what we've learned. Let's take what's inspired us. Let's act on it so that every child, wherever they live, can be safe to learn. And the follow-up from this event, as I mentioned at the start, there'll be an email to all participants with links to the presentations that Chloe and Quentin did. And we didn't have time for questions from the chat, but we will follow up. Some have been answered in the chat during the event, and we will be following up appropriately with other questions that haven't been answered, so everyone gets to see what the responses are to those. But a very big thank you again to Joy for chairing, to all of our speakers, and to all of you who have participated. And I think it's now incumbent on us all, as per Joy, to walk the talk and to turn this into action for children. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks to
and
everyone.
stay safe. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.